Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for coming. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Malt. Thank you, Christy, and whoever else I spoke with over the years that gave us a chance. I'd like to talk about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. Cubs or Indians? Well, actually, what I'm going to try to do tonight is talk to you about three subjects. I'm going to try and braid together three subjects, and hopefully by the end we'll have a rope strong enough that we'll be able to grab onto this concept and pull the Salisbury Mills Preserve forward. Okay, first I want to talk to you about the first thread I want to talk about is what the Salisbury Mills Preserve is, how Malt came into control of the property, and then the management plan that was developed for the property. I'm an expert of nothing. Everything I know comes from Max Peterson's book, The History of Salisbury, in which he has about a 20-page chapter that goes through the development of the property, the area, the mills of Salisbury, from almost the beginning of Salisbury till basically now. The Salisbury Mills Preserve is a 70-acre piece of property located between Smead Road, which is the first left you take right here, and West Shore Road, which is the road that goes up to Lake Dunmore. And it's mostly, there's one row of houses along that L, and then the 70 acres is in there. On that 70 acres are the archaeological ruins that collectively illustrate what a resource-based, water-powered, local and regional economy was from the late 1700s to the early 1900s. Okay, so let me tell you quickly how I came to be interested in this project. I'm the last miller in Salisbury. My mill is located on Prospect Street, which is down here, the first right that goes down towards the cemetery. And I'm up on the shoulder of the Leicester River. And after reading we came here in 1978, and this book was written in 1976. And in the early 80s, I had started out, my first mill was in the old forge, which is right just the side of the post office, which had been in basically continuous use since the late 1700s. And we set up an operation after I was done teaching industrial arts at Middlebury High School, where we were using both floors, and we had it set up in a small mill so that we had a progression that would go from raw materials to shipped out goods and that. And then we grew out of that fairly quickly and built a mill on a 5,000 square foot mill, 50 by 100, down on Prospect Street. And it was there, after reading this, that I realized that the only difference between what I was doing and what all these other guys had done 100, 150 years before was that I had electricity and they had water. Otherwise, we were in the same business and we were facing the same realities that millers face. These businesses were fairly small businesses. Most of them probably had under 10 men. At one time, some of them ran multiple shifts, so they might get up to like 20, 25 men running 24 hours a day, but they were small operations. And these guys faced the same realities that I faced. That is, you run a mill or a mill runs you. That's the rule number one of manufacturing. Number two is that there are 5 M's in a miller's life. men, machinery, the marketplace, money, and me. And every single day, something is, if only one of them is a problem, it's a good day. And you can have all of those things going haywire at the same time, and you are really careening out of control. Anyway, that's enough of I just want to let you know how I came to be interested in this. The property, I refer to it as our property because I feel a little bit of ownership with malt on this property, but I'll refer interchangeably to our property as the malt property. So if I say our property, I'm referring to the Salisbury Mills piece. I was renting from Jim and Max Peterson, who owned the mill. This book had come out. The Petersons bought the 70 acres from Central Vermont Public Service in 1997. Shortly after, the Petersons, they were already in their 60s, later 60s when they bought that, and the taxes became burdensome for them, and they took the property to the Vermont Land Trust to buy the developmental rights from it. At the same time, the Vermont Land Trust partnered with Malt, and somehow or other, the two of them bought the property from Jim and Max Peterson. The Petersons bought it because they knew that the property had deep historical significance, and their connection was even stronger. They were boys growing up when the ball field was the ball field. Now it's overgrown with first growth forest. They used to, when they were very young, what I'll show you is the middle mill. The middle mill pond was still in use, and they used to, when I walked the property with Max, he showed me where they used to have the rope swing, where they would swing way out and drop into the mill pond, and that was the swimming hole for the Salisbury kids. So they had this very strong connection to the land. Anything that gets done on that property, in some way, I think that Jim and Max Peterson should get, posthumously for Max. Jim is still living, but he's pretty old now. I think that some kind of recognition goes to them, because this whole thing would not have been possible without their vision. As I said, I was working with them, and at the time that the land transferred to Malt, and then there was a write-up in the newspaper that Malt had bought the property from the Petersons. I went to Joya Kuss, who was the Malt executive director at that time, and said, Joya, let me propose something with that piece of property. And I made this proposal to Joya, that three, what I refer to as the red, green, and blue lines, be developed on the property. The red line would take a visitor on an industrial tour of what was there, a tour through the relics, hopefully from the upriver end of the property to the bottom of the property. And by the time that person was done walking that the red line and viewing various interpretive signage that would be developed by Malt, they would have an understanding of what hydropower was like in that time period that I mentioned, from the late 1700s to the early 1900s, because on that property, yes, if you go back one, please. On that property, hammered into out of the from the farthest upriver part of the property was a dam. That's we'll show you next page. Was a dam. Hammered into the ground is the sluiceway that's perhaps that wide and that deep, hammered into the bedrock, that the water came from the dam through the sluiceway down to run the mill wheels, undershot mill wheels for the ironworks that was at that spot. Then when you're standing there, you see the supports for all the penstock, a pipe penstock that took that water eventually down to what was referred to as the middle mill, and they ran a pulp grinding operation in the middle mill. Then that water was let go and it went down to a dam. If you could go back one, Christy.
This one?
No, the other direction. A dam that's there, and that dam is still very, very much, you can feel, both sides of the river are dammed there. And the water was caught there and it ran a mill. Then ran through this wetland down to another mill pond, and it ran a third group of mills. So that's, somebody could see, if they went through the first line, the red line, by the time they had gone through, they would have a feel for what that was, and with some interpreted signage, for instance, at where the old forge was, a nice sign of maybe photos of an existing forge building like is down in Furnace Brook or over in Neshabie. They would have a good feel for what it was like. Another place, perhaps a diagram of what undershot, overshot hydropower was, or what hydropower means. What hydropower means in terms of head, the amount of water, the amount it flows, the greater the power. Just a little explanation. Okay, the second way that a visitor could visit the property was, say, on the blue line. And on the blue line, they could go through the property and see there are three very distinct ecologies on that property. There's an upland forest, which has chestnut oaks in it, which are pretty rare around here. There's a riparian zone where the river runs through, and then there are several wetlands on the property. I thought that you could go through and have an ecological tour of what these different zones look like. What these different zones look like. The third way to use the property would be as a recreational tool for walking, mountain biking, cross-country skiing, trail running. Really, the land rises and falls. I think you could have a fairly, and it's large enough that I know I go back there and ride my mountain bike back there. It's, it's not, 70 acres is a nice piece of land, and it's very varied. Okay, Christy, if you could go back to slide number 2, please. Okay, here we are here, and here's the property, and here is Lake Dunmore, right here, and this is the story that I thought we could tell the people. Here's Lake Dunmore, here's the other side of Lake Dunmore. You're going up quite high here. This land goes like this and then downhill like that. Our piece of property is one of 4 parts of a jigsaw that collectively show what water power meant and why in the very early 1800s Salisbury was one of the most industrialized locations in Vermont. The main reason for that is that all of this up here was a watershed that put water into Lake Dunmore. Lake Dunmore drains in one place, the Leicester River. From here down to the village is a 110-foot drop. and it cracks in 3 places. There's a crack right up at the beginning of the property. It's at the bottom of John Newseeder's land. The second crack is on Smead Road, where it falls 20-some feet, and that's a location. And then the third crack is the Village Falls, which is at the location of the new bridge in town. I just walked across the new bridge today. It's ready today, and I hope that the Historical Society got that thing captured, because that was a bridge in a box. That was interesting to see that thing go together. Anyway, the thing that is special about our piece of property is that it has access to 3 of the drops. Our property on one side or another has 3 of the drops, so that as a person walked through, and several of the mills are still intact on the middle drop, so it's very easy to get a feel of the water dropping, the mills, what was milled there at the time, and yeah. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so then, all right, Christy, the next picture, if you would. Okay, so as we're looking at the large picture, now we're focusing in a little more, and here is West Shore Road going up, and our Rogers Road going here, and we're over here right now. We're over there, and the property has some unique challenges to make it work as a good flow as a park. One is that our only access is right here, and we have a parking area right here. My feeling is that the best way to show this is to start at the upriver end and then work your way in a circle like this. And if you were to do that, then I think you would have the best feeling. Even though, if you go back to the oldest things that were done, so we're at right here is the old bridge in. Is that right? Yes. Yes. This is the old Mirror Lake right here. Right here is the bridge that was just repaired, and that was in 1783. A man named Colonel Thomas Sawyer came, and he developed what was known as in the area as Sawyer's Mills, and he had a sawmill and then eventually a grist mill. And I think that depending on the intellectual fracture that you want to aim at with the signage at the people, that at the very entry level, a grade school kid, a 6th grade kid, could come in and understand what was going on. Then without littering the place with signs, you could start aiming up slightly in the, let's say, the intellectual fracture level. The material for the iron forge here and the second iron forge that was down here, which is where the CVPS power plant is, the material for that came from Mineville, New York. If you aimed your signs correctly, I think that you could give somebody a really strong feeling of what a regional economy developed here, and how by producing something, money came in. That money was in turn distributed out as wages, and the multiplier effect, and eventually that's why Salisbury kind of grew. The second thing you could show is the symbiotic relationship that existed between the mills in Salisbury and the surrounding small farms that were beginning to be cleared. 1783, you want to think Rabble in Arms by Kenneth Roberts is a really good example, where Route 7 at the beginning, before the Revolutionary War, was just a horse path. By 1783, there were wagons that were moving up the Route 7 corridor, and that's Rabble in Arms really shows that development as you go through it. You could start to show that the reason the first thing that was built on our property right here in the middle set of falls was a flax mill where the people of the local area brought in their flax. It was washed and I think hammered apart as for fiber, and then it was dried, and then the people must have taken it from that point back home and wove it into flax, which was one of the first things. Anyway, it's just, I think you could show that. Another thing that you could show is that because the span of time that occurred, that these mills operated, one of the things that I learned as a manufacturer is that you are buffeted by the currents of the economy and the currents of history. These guys, in the early 1800s, they had gotten their mills going. Along comes the War of 1812. 1812 war, a big thing. The English boycotted, not boycotted, they blockaded the colonies, which forced all these small mills, didn't force them, it gave them an opportunity to rise up without competition from more efficient manufacturers somewhere else. That's the story that it gave them cover. In 1849, this mill, the Huntley Iron Works, started up, and what gave them a big boost was that they supplied iron for the Civil War. And down here was a woolen mill, and the woolen mill supplied the wool for uniforms for the Vermonters that went to the Civil War, and prisoners down in Massachusetts that were brought back. So these are all little stories that I think, you know, again, depending on what you want to take away. You don't want to shoot over the head of a sixth grader, but you don't want to shoot under the intellectual capacity of a college-educated person who's going to take the walk. And I think that I think that you could accomplish both of these along the red line, or for that matter, along the blue line, which would be the ecological tour. And I think that you could, have something to show. Okay, let's see. These pictures, this is an example of like what you could put on an interpretive sign. And when I talk about interpretive signs, I mean like, the signs that are, they're about that big, and they're right there. And then you look up and you see the picture of whatever, and then you see down in here right next to you the sluiceway hammered into the ground, and then you see this picture here, and then you see the penstock things going down there, and you walk a little farther down and you'll see that in the middle mill the actual mill wheels are still there that they use for grinding the pulp. Ooh, they get to see that. They see the ruins of the first middle mill, and in that is the location of the sluiceway goes right down in there. You can see how the undershot thing. I mean, you'd see the picture. Here you go. Here's the wheels of that, and if you can see this is the pulp that was ground on the property by the Atlas Paper Company, the Atlas Powder Company, which eventually built this, tore down the old mill and built that one, which was never used, was used for packing the 80 millimeter shells that went to France with the American troops and were used in were used by the Americans in the First World War. That pulp came from here. That's just another little story that you know, that I think could make the property interesting. What I really would like is if people, you know, after they took one of these lines, went home and said, "Boy, you know, that was worth it." You know, when my cousin comes here, I'm going to take him down there and show that, and something that they really could be proud of. And another thing that I think that this property could do is give the people of Salisbury an additional brick in their foundation of community. A kid who started out in a 5th or 6th grade class, and the bus took them up there and the kids walked through, and they had, that kid could eventually grow up and say, you know, oh yeah, I'm from Salisbury, Vermont. You know, that's a town with a really long, my town had a really long history of industrial manufacturing, and you know, I'm proud, the kid's proud of that, and they go home, and again, it's just another way to help build community, and I think that the property could do it. Another thing about the property is there are several really nice spots on it. They're just really pleasant spots. The location of the up at the upper falls, the location up there, it's really nice. I mean, it's a pretty big sized falls up there. I think if you put a nice little picnic table there, that it'd be a place where it'd be very nice, nice to be. The location of the middle dam is another very nice. The dam is you know, 15, 18 feet high, and the bank is still up above that, and you sit up on that, and there's you know, it's nice up there. And then down at that was right in here where I was just speaking of, and then down in here, when you get close, you go down in the lowlands and you're close to the river again. It's nice down in there, and I think that you could put a few picnic tables up, and you would have a place that people would, you know, make an effort to go to and enjoy. Okay, well, what else we got here on this? This is, okay, so I mentioned to you that you could either go through it on a industrial or a ecological or a recreational tour. Let me take a moment and talk to you about the second thing that I'm going to try and braid to you, and that was how, I guess we've spoken about how the land came to Malt, but now I would like to talk to you a bit about this book, which is called Interpreting the Changing Landscape, a Management Plan for the Salisbury Mills Preserve. When the property was transferred, there was a legal document that was transferred with the property that stipulated that a management plan had to be developed by Malt for the property. Joya Kuss was a graduate of the Conway School of Landscape Design, and she went to the people who were there and said, would you like to do a internship, have your people come up and develop a management plan, which they did. And maybe about 10 students came up for several weeks and conducted interviews of the principals, primarily Max, held 2 town-wide meetings for input on a survey. What do you think this property could be used for? What do you not want to see happen to it? And then they compiled the survey. And then they did they got the soil maps and did a mapping of the soils, and they created all these pictures that you're seeing up here are contained in this management plan. Okay, so now you have interpreting the changing landscape. Well, that's one way that you could create a management plan, and that's kind of what you would expect to come out of a school of land management. If you'd have been the Conway School of Economics, you would have had interpreting the economic landscape of the Salisbury Mills. Or if you had the Conway School of cultural sociology, you would have had a management plan that would have concentrated on the who was here, where they came from, what the effect of the manufacturing was, what were the problems, what were the successes. So the one that was developed again was by the Conway School of Design and landscape design, of land design, and this is what they got. Personally, I think this thing is first rate. I hadn't read it in the past. I hadn't read it for. This was made in 2006, so what's that? 11 years ago. I hadn't read it in at least 7 or 8 years. And when it's been sitting on my desk, getting lower and lower and lower in the pile, and when I talked to Christy and Carl, and they said, "Would you be interested in talking?" Well, I had to go wrench and find down there and find what was available, and I pulled it out and reread it. These were what, 19, 20, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. They did a really, really good job. They did a really good job, and I was just a one-time read-through, and I had been back. I was brought right back into what was there. I really commend them, and there aren't too many copies of this around. And I think that what Malt wants to do is put this on the table and say, what's good in this? What's bad in this? Do we want to go forward with this? Do we want to completely start over? But I think that's part of where Malt could go with the management plan. Okay, so among the inventories that they took, the ecological inventories, was the flora and fauna of the area, and there is a fairly strong corridor that goes through of animals. As a matter of fact, I had a bad motorcycle last summer, as a matter of fact, and in trying to get back to human form again, I rode my bike once a day, like over to the Branbury ride back, and as I was riding down the hill right here, man, a bear ran out in front of me, and I almost hit the bear. And on my motorcycle, I hit a deer, and so it was like, oh man, this is going to be a hard summer. And and then I a couple days before, as I'd been riding my bicycle down through there, I'd heard some crashing in the woods, and I looked over. I didn't hear anything. I thought, gee, a branch just fell in the woods. But now I think it was the bear again. Anyway, there's a land corridor. Christy, could you go back a couple slides? Back. Back one more. Maybe. That's this guy right here, right? Okay. So far, everything that I've talked to you about is taking place on the Malt 70 acres. I want to give you a little bit of reality of where that 70 acres is, because there's a potential for a much bigger recreational walking tour with our land being the central piece of it. Okay, so here we are here. Right across the road from us is the Farwell Forest Preserve. And that's a piece of land that's bigger than our piece of land, that goes up maybe 150 vertical feet, and then over to it includes Mud Pond. And it is nice up there. It is a nice little cross-country ski and a walk and a bike. And for a few years I had developed, Dave Newseeder was the caretaker for the property, and he had given me permission to develop mountain bike trails on that property. And it is a nice piece of property. Okay, so that means that, and this, the Farwell Forest Preserve is managed by the New England Conservancy, you know? Yeah. And it's managed by them, and they're the kind of people that are into cooperating with an organization like MALT to link up the trail system on both pieces of property, and all of a sudden you're talking not 70 acres but more like 150 or 200 acres, and you're talking from here up to here, you know, what do you think, Kath? Short mile?
Or even beyond.
Even more than a mile. Okay, now this far side of our property, you'll see, okay, it's right in here, and then it goes here. Okay, Tris, go up with a couple slides there. Yeah, okay. Yes. Okay. So does everybody follow with me? This is Smead Road running up here, and here's our property here, and here's one of the river crossings, and it goes to a road that's referred to as a private road, but it's in fact Central Vermont Public Service, and there's a right-of-way, and this goes up to Sunset Hill. Sunset Hill, and right now this is all coming from right here like this and up is all the Vast Trail. It's a trail, it's a variant off of the Route 7 Vast Corridor, and it doesn't get a huge amount of traffic, but it does get, and eventually it comes out, it goes up over Sunset Hill and then down to Campersville. Okay. The distance from here to the top is 3/4 of a mile, Kat? Say 3/4 of a mile up to the top. If we could get together with the people that allowed Vast to go across their property, which is the Lake Dunmore group, which is Stuart Fraser, who is an old Keewaydin alum, who comes in the summer, and they have, that property is the backside of the Waterhouse's property, and so I get access to it by buying a pass at Waterhouse's, and but anyway, if Malt could possibly join with, get permission to use the Vast Trail, they're already letting the public go up there. Then you've got a piece of a recreational project that includes not only our piece, but it's more than triple the size of what we've got. And you've got over a mile, probably a mile and a half of trail system from the top of Sunset Hill. Sunset Hill is really nice because at the top, you've got a beautiful view down onto Lake Dunmore and over up onto Rattlesnake, all the way across the Adirondacks, you know. It's a really nice view, very pleasant place to be up there. Anyway, it's possible that's where Malt could go with that. Okay, so what else do we have here, Christine? You can see, I'll show you here. You can see that these mills were not beautiful mills, and they were not that big. I mean, that guy, I don't think he's got as much space in his mill as I have in mine. And this was actually the grist mill that was located at the New Bridge. The down, as you're on the New Bridge, looking down towards the power plant, look tight to your right, and you'll see the foundation, which got a little bit beat up in the construction. That's all there for that foundation right there. Here is, as you're going up to Lake Dunmore, this is Mirror Lake, and that was our land starts right behind this house. We've got all the shoreline of that. Eventually Mirror Lake gets narrow, goes past a couple of the old mills, and then another falls. Really nice little spot in there. You can see that all of everything was cleared behind that. All that, this is our land. All of that is now pretty much first growth-ish forest. There were some in red pine forest that were when the government was paying people to plant forests. Okay, what else we got, Christy? Okay, so this is the flora, this is the fauna of the area, and I want to show you a few of the challenges that we have right now that before the property works real well. This is the pipeline running down from the new dam, runs down here, and then here's the CVPS power station right here. Our right-of-way comes in here, and we're allowed to park here. And then Dave Newseeder's property is a deep cut into it. And then this is the pipeline. Right now, what people are doing is they're either parking here or they're parking in the Farwell Forest parking area here, and either just walking down over the edge here, which is dicey, or parking here and then walking along the pipeline for a short distance up to here. You have to cross, there's a little chute of this river here. The river crossing, you have to cross the river to be able to experience the whole piece of property. Right now, that's the #1 challenge, is crossing the river. Because right now, this little dip here, yeah, you got to get down it and you can get through it, yeah, but it's not that big. It's maybe you know, a short 10 feet, but it's a difficult 10 feet. This is all an existing, this dashed line right here is the existing road bed that was put in, and it came down across the river here, and here's Smead Road right here. That road bed is in first-rate condition. I cut out the, well, goes back. Joni, when's the last time you and I met? It goes. Who was director at the time? It goes back at least 2. Yeah, Josh, I think. And I had cut out all the deadfall that had crossed that, so that it was a continuous thing. We did not have a crossing here. All of a sudden, we came back 1 year. Whew, there's a crossing. There's a bridge there. You know, how did that get here? Somebody had wildcatted, and CVPS came in. You'll see there's a power line. I guess it's not marked on that, but there's a power line that runs through this. Not through our main power. I guess the power line runs down like that. And somebody had built a couple hemlock logs, a bunch of corduroy trees across that, and they had come in and gotten all the firewood, all the logs that CV had cut down on our property. You know, either took them out for logs, whatever. It was a. I think I know who did it, but I ain't saying. Anyway, okay. So that brings up the subject of bridges. I think bridges are the first semi-significant capital outlay that Malt would have to make for this property to work. And you know, there are bridges and there are bridges. When I bought my land that we built our first log cabin on from Martin Hudson, you know, Art would have pulled a couple pieces of hemlock over there and you know, gotten some 4x rough cut lumber, green lumber, and put it across there, and it would have been there for, you know, a long time. And that's how Art taught me how to make bridges. And then, okay, so yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that for what we do on this property, there's the potential to have a good, better, and best story. You go in there with the good story, you put down the hemlock logs, you walk across, you get through, it's good enough, it works. But I think that if you're developing something and you're getting a lot of your manpower, the way VAST does, from volunteer labor, that you could develop something that would really be aesthetically attractive. So on these little bridges, why couldn't you have, you know, like a nice little arched bridge with a nice railing on it, Adirondack, this and that on it, make it look nice, something that people be proud of. The same way with the river crossing, where's the river cross? Oh, it's not on this, but it's right here. Yeah, here we go. On this river crossing, you know, some nice stone embankments, you know, a nice bridge, something that people would be proud of. And again, that's on Malt's table to discuss and that. But I think that you could have a really, I think there's a potential for something to be intellectually and aesthetically valuable and pleasing to the public. And on that, I think that I will end, because I think that's what I tried to show you. I wanted to braid together what was there, how Malt came into possession of the property, and a bit about what was in the management plan. And with that, I will end it.